Welcome to the How to DIY Bricklaying video. We're going to look at building a brick barbecue, laying a patio, erecting a fence, and laying a basic footing. Pick a suitable spot to build your barbecue. Remember to consider the late afternoon and early evening sun before deciding on a site. Begin by dry laying the bricks to establish a basic shape. Ensure the final design accommodates your barbecue coal pan and grill. Now's the time to make any adjustments. Once you've decided on a final shape, remove the bricks. You can now begin to lay the bricks with a sand and cement mortar mix. Refer to the fact file featured at the end of the tape for quantities. When laying your first course of bricks, make sure they're all bedded well into the mortar. This can be done by sharply tapping the bricks with the edge of your bricklaying trowel. It's important to lay your first course of bricks with care, as these are the main foundation of your barbecue. If you're unhappy with any of the bricks you've laid, don't be afraid to take them up and relay them. After completing your first course of bricks, you must make sure all your horizontal and verticals are true. Use a good quality level to achieve this. Now remove any excess mortar. Make sure that the legs extend from the back wall to exactly the same distance. Any fine adjustments can be made at this stage. By using your level, you can align the face of the bricks by hand or by using the edge of your trowel. Measure the width of the rear wall and transfer this measurement to the front. Adjust the front if the two measurements aren't the same. This, coupled with your previous adjustments, will make for a perfectly square base. Once you've completed the barbecue base, you may now wish to consider customizing the basic design. Here, we've decided to extend the left-hand side to provide a useful shelf. At some point during the construction, you'll need to cut a brick. It's very important that you follow this procedure. 1. Mark your brick, allowing for the mortar joint. 2. Always wear eye protection. 3. Make sure the brick is on a sound surface. Use a wide-bladed chisel and strike this with a lump hammer. 4. Neaten up the cut edges with the chisel and hammer. Always lay the cut edge of the brick inwards, leaving its natural face outwards. Remove any excess mortar. Continue to lay further courses. Remember, under no circumstances should the joint in one course of bricks be matched up to another joint on the next course. Joints must always be staggered for optimum strength. Spread the mortar over a few bricks and tidy up to minimize any spillage when tamping down your next brick. Then, form a V down the center of the mortar. This allows for easier adjustment and leveling of the brick to be laid on top. After you've laid a few courses, check your vertical and horizontal alignments with the level. Make any adjustments required. This should be done to all laid faces, sides, back, and so on. We've now reached a point where the support for our barbecue pan is required. In this instance, we've used a full brick rotated at 90 degrees to the side walls. When laying one brick on top of or next to each other, make sure that the joint is full. That's to say, there's no air pockets in the mortar. This will stop any water building up in bad weather, which would eventually lead to cracking should there be a frost. Remember to level up as you go along. At various stages throughout the construction, check your vertical and horizontals, making minor adjustments where necessary. Here we've left this joint dry. In other words, no mortar between these two bricks. This will allow a reasonable airflow to help out when lighting the barbecue coals. Now, lay the last few courses to finish off the barbecue. Always remember, with a garden project like this, there's no hard and fast rules to their design. Build a bit of individuality into your projects. When the mortar is firm to the touch, it's time to start pointing. You'll notice that a pointing trowel is smaller than a bricklaying trowel. This is to enable you to reach the corners and generally makes the job a lot easier. As you can see, pointing is a fairly simple process. It enhances the final effect and also improves resistance to water penetration. Never attempt to point up your bricklaying whilst the mortar is still wet. This will only make the job more difficult and can spoil the professionalism of your job. Any gaps can be filled with small amounts of mortar. Now clean out any of the mortar that may have blocked the air hole. Brush down your brickwork with a soft bristled brush to clean off any loose bits of mortar after pointing. We've decided to include an integral wine rack with our barbecue using land drains. First, lay a bed of mortar to build a support wall. Leave enough space for the wine rack between here and the barbecue wall. Lay your bricks as before. Realizing that a quantity of half bricks will be required, we've pre-cut these in advance. After laying a couple of courses, spread mortar to start laying the wine rack. Make sure you achieve a tight fit. Use the same procedure to lay as many drains as you like. It's advisable to cap these off with a garden slab or something similar. This can now be leveled up. Next to our barbecue, we're going to build a brick planter by removing a slab from the patio. Dry lay the bricks as before to determine your size. You may wish to remove 2 or 3 slabs. Lay your bricks on a mortar bed. Use exactly the same bricklaying process as with the barbecue. For example, no joints lining up, and so on. Even though this is a small structure, it's still important to level up the horizontal and verticals with your level. It's very important to lay slabs on a sound base. This will minimize any chance of movement. Here, we've used broken concrete roof tiles as hardcore. Spread your dry slab laying mix over the hardcore. Refer to the fact file at the end of the tape for quantities. The mix needs to be at least 60 millimeters deep. Level this out with a bricklaying trowel and rake a few channels with the point of the trowel. This will make leveling up easier. Now it's time to lay your first slab. Always keep your back straight and bend at the knees when lifting heavy objects. Lay the slab gently so as not to disturb the bed. Tamp down the slab. In this instance, we've used the shaft of a lump hammer. Note the fall of the slab from left to right. If you're laying a patio, the fall should always be away from the house. Here, we've achieved an average fall, being about 15 millimeters over 600 millimeters. Lay the spirit level onto the slab and tamp down the side you wish the fall to run until the bubble sits about halfway on the line, instead of falling in between the lines. This must be consistent with all the slabs to achieve the same fall. Check that the slab is stable on its bed. If there's any movement on its diagonals, tamp more of the mix under the relevant corner or corners, then recheck. Now that you've a starting point, continue to lay the slabs from your first slab. As you lay your other slabs, ensure the edges butt up to each other to maintain squareness. However, it must be pointed out that this is only the case when the slabs being used have a straight edge. Some slabs have a riven, uneven face and need a gap of some 10 to 15 millimeters between each other when laid. If you decide to use these, after laying them, brush the same dry mix into the joints. This will harden from the moisture in the sand. Once your first row of slabs are down, start the second row. If you transfer over your levels with the spirit level, there'll be no need to work out the fall on each slab again. They'll all transfer over. Due to the size and weight of concrete fencing posts and concrete gravel boards, you may find it easier to enlist the help of a friend with this project. Begin by laying your concrete posts flat. Space them out by cutting a piece of timber to the same width as the fence panels being used. Lay all of your posts on the ground, spacing them with the same piece of timber. Now begin to dig your holes for the posts. These should be a minimum of 450 millimeters. Remember, when purchasing your concrete posts, they should be a minimum of 600 millimeters longer than the measurement of the fence panel and gravel board added together. For example, in this demonstration, the fence panel is 1500 millimeters. The gravel board is 300 millimeters. Therefore, the concrete post being used is 2400 millimeters. Now lower your first concrete post into the hole. Whilst it's being held upright, shovel the concrete mix, refer to the fact file at the end of the tape, around the base of the post. Tamp this down with a firm object. Here we've used timber. Now check the verticals with your spirit level. Run a length of string from the finishing point to the first concrete post. Adjust this to a height of approximately 300 millimeters from the ground. Then double check that there's enough height on the post to accommodate the fence panel. The string will act as a horizontal guide for the top of each gravel board. Now position your first gravel board. Make sure it's inserted into the slot on the post. Now position the fence panel on top of the gravel board, making sure this is into the vertical slot on the post. Now, temporarily lower the string to the ground to enable easier maneuverability of the second post. Insert this into the second hole, driving the slot well onto the gravel board and fence panel. Check your verticals, and the post can now be concreted in as with the first post. Repeat this process for as many boards and panels as you have to erect. Always make sure that the fence panels and gravel boards are tight between each post. Start by cutting several lengths of timber stakes. Fix them together with a hammer and nails. The two uprights must be spaced as wide as your footing needs to be. Measure the distance from where your footing needs to start. Find the center point and mark this with a nail. At the other end of your footing, mark out exactly the same. Now, run a length of string from one nail to the other. This strung line is now exactly parallel to the fence at the rear. With a spade, mark out about 150 millimeters either side of the string. Now dig this out to a depth of about 300 millimeters. Fill the trench with a concrete mix. Refer to the end of the tape for quantities. Level out with a spade. Then check with a spirit level. Getting the footing as level as possible will help you when you come to lay your first course of bricks. Leave the concrete for 24 hours before attempting to lay your bricks.